I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. His name is Kenneth FitzGerald. He is an educator, writer, designer, and artist, likely best known for the second. He is the author of an amazing book called Volume, Writings on Graphic Design, Music, Art, and Culture, which was published in 2010 by Princeton Architectural Press. He was a regular contributor to Emigrate magazine. His writings have also appeared in, amongst others, I magazine, Etop magazine, and Idea magazine. The books Graphic Design and Reading, The Education of a Graphic Designer, Volume 2, and the upcoming The Graphic Design Reader, plus the online journals Voice, the AIGA Journal of Graphic Design, Design Observer, and Speak Up. He also wrote the foreword for Stefan Sagmeister's Ginza Graphic Gallery Books monograph, was a guest in the third year of Design Matters with Debbie Millman, and has been a visiting critic for Cranbrook Academy of Art's 2D design program, SVA's Master in Branding, and other places you may not suspect. He produced The News of the World spelled W-H-I-R-L-E-D, a novel as 4-issue limited edition magazine that received awards for excellence from the American Center for Design and AIGA. Kenneth's artwork is included in public and private collections in New England and New York, and the Franklin Furness Museum of Modern Art's Artist Books collection. Currently, he is a professor of art at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, and on the steering committee of the AIGA Design Educators Community. He erratically maintains a blog, ephemeralstates.com. So, he wrote this book called Volume, which is one of the best books to have come out about graphic design in the past decade, in my opinion. Within the book, he wrote this paragraph. Design has no heritage of or belief in criticism. Design education programs continue to emphasize visual articulation, not verbal or written. The goal is to sell your idea to a client and or a hypothetical audience. Design in relation to culture and society is rarely confronted. These ideas and this criticality of greater design culture are things that I believe we as a program share very much with Kenneth and his view of design. And we're really, really lucky to have him here. So with that, could we give him a hand and welcome him.
All right, first thing first. I mean, this is what we do now, right? Yeah. Okay, wait a minute. Selfie thing. That's okay.
Are you just taking pictures of yourself?
Why would I not want to? Anyway, thank you, Ian. Thank you all very much for having me here. It is really flattering and humbling to have been invited to share this week with you. And people have been thanking me for being here, but no, all the thanks are mine for what's been happening so far and what will. And I just hope that in a small way I can return the favor and give back what you're giving to me. So again, thank you very, very much for this. What I want to read at you tonight is something I wrote in 2010, sort of like in the burst of energy when I finished my book, when it sort of occurred to me that because I wrote this book, which is the most public expression of my work, that somebody might actually invite me to talk about what I do or what I think I'm doing. And so the challenge was, well, explain what it is you think you're doing. And another aspect of it is that if you're, a critic, it's usually associated with being negative, and I don't worry about that too much. I am concerned about and critique the celebratory nature of a lot of design discussions. But still, I felt that if somebody was generous enough to invite me to talk to them about graphic design, I should, make them feel good about what they're doing. And I do what I do because I'm excited about this, and I wanted to express this. And so Along with explaining what it is I think I'm doing here, I'm also going to give you my version of celebrating graphic design. Now, this is going to meander, but eventually it's going to come up with an end. Well, it's going to come up with an end. No, it's going to come up with an end in something, you know, for me is you know, positive. And I hope you think so. First of all, I'd like to consider this is going to come, I'm going to keep returning to this, and you'll see it also. But you see, this is from 1918, a person identified themselves only as HKM. Strictly considered, writing about music is as illogical as singing about economics. All the other arts can be talked about in terms of ordinary life and experience. A poem, a statue, a painting, or a play is a representation of somebody or something, and can be measurably described, the purely aesthetic values aside, by describing what it represents. Now, what I do as a critical writer is respond to creativity, and when I set my mind to it, I was able to condense everything wrong and everything right about doing this to 3 words. These 3 words have bothered me for some time, but I never fully contemplated why they irked me. These 3 words conjure up a picture, a ludicrous image ripe for parody, a caricature Martha Graham prancing and swooning across a bleak brick plaza at the foot of some austere anonymous steel and glass skyscraper, tools swirling with every grand affected sweeping gesture. Maybe it's an entire dance troupe capering around like loony fools. Modern dance, meet modern architecture. Somebody cue the laugh track. That's dancing about architecture. Writing about music is like dancing about architecture is the full familiar formulation of what I'm talking about. Goodbye. It has no definite attribution, being contemporarily credited to Steve Martin, Frank Zappa, Laurie Anderson, and most recently, Elvis Costello. There's some evidence that each of them made at least an approximation of the jibe, but not for its coinage. The distinctive personalities involved provide affirmation for each of the claimants. You know, it sounds like something she would have said. Attempts to establish provenance are ongoing, but likely pointless. In a New York Times Freakonomics blog post in December 2010, Garson O'Toole's quoteinvestigator.com was credited for unearthing the earliest usage in 1979 by, wait for it, actor, comedian, musician, Martin Mull. And in fact, in his new memoir, Elvis Costello also makes this attribution, but he says that it was his manager, Jake Riviera, who was going around saying this and saying that Elvis said it. So he sets the record straight. Now, at best, Mull adapted the New Republic construction I showed you a moment ago. The earliest example of the corollary that O'Toole could locate. Mull obviously was going for laughs, where HKM was simply making an argument. The many permutations over time are evidence that this is a popular diss, one that spawned a website dedicated to establishing its originator. You can also dial up a batch of blogs titled with variations on dancing about architecture, all centered on discussions of music. Each defies their titles as they verbally promenade. Now, the attraction of the dig is plain. It's a clever, crisp, slightly surreal twist of language, a crowd-pleasing deflation of the stereotypical pretentiousness everyone associates with critical commentary. It's unfortunate that the phrase is so firmly attached to music criticism. It's tailor-made for graphic design. In comparison, there's likely less patience amongst design practitioners for deep thought about their activity. Plus, there's graphic design's historic association with architecture. But amusing as the remark is, it's totally phony. Snicker if you want, it can't stand scrutiny. Of course, at the center of the snark is the futility of analysis itself, as opposed to feeling it evidently. Not only does the wisecrack stick it to writing, the writing subject suffers collateral damage. Isn't writing a song about love, language, Montana, ventriloquism, revenge, and guilt as much a performance of building boogie? To be consistent, you can't stop at the response to the art. You must encompass and reject the work as well. Our established creative disciplines, and many of their themes and tropes, seem normal only through tradition. They are regarded as natural because they're so pervasive and established. Take that away and all expression seems absurd. Talking about love is like daubing paint on fabric to cruelty. Not that upstarts are universally pleased with their press, but established artists well into their careers usually outtrot the comment. It's the hook of a lament on negative critical response to the musician's recent offerings. But it's not like musicians have ever waxed poetic about being a musician, right? And how many songs are there that have songwriting and performing as their subject matter? What about freestyle rap battles? Do they still do that? Plus, somebody like Laurie Anderson should definitely know better. She collaborated on songs with critic Lester Bangs in her early days. If the marketplace has spoken on the issue, it's declared a constant and voracious appetite for indulging in and observation of house hoofing. Admittedly, the preponderance of what's in the music press is celebrity reporting, writing about musicians, which if they're pop stars, if you're talking to them, it's an experience approximating talking to architecture. That there's a dearth of effective literature in any creative discipline is a given. However, there are also exceptions that prove cavorting to constructions can be just as vital as cutting the grooves. Similarly, graphic designers have an ambiguous relationship with their literature. Pragmatic how-to articles abound and are happily consumed, as are showcases of and interviews with leading practitioners. A prevailing opinion amongst practitioners, however, is that critical thought should be expressed through and in the work, not in pretentious essays, like this one, if you must indulge in it at all. It's ironic that the smarter musicians recycle dancing about architecture. The remark's nuance and wit is beyond most pop stars, and it's given that there is plenty of writing incapable of matching the subtlety of the art it attempts to describe. Still, I've always been averse to the comment simply as an enthusiast for the arts and reading about and discussing them. Having an occasional status as a line dancer in my own right doesn't play into my response. Grousing about bad press is understandable, but tearing down the entire communal, generative experience of art is overkill. If anyone needs and benefits from architectural dancing, it's musicians of the kind who fuss about dancing to architecture. Through phrasing variations over the years, the comment will actually reach further. It's often alleged that merely talking about music is a pointless activity. How could any art survive such prohibition on conversation? That artists might idealize a passive, undiscriminating audience seems the antithesis of the creative contract. For all their drollery, the total 8 words in question comprise perhaps the most nihilistic assertion ever uttered about the creative experience. However, it provides a service by negatively engaging essential truths about creativity in all of its forms. By denying the effectual possibility of discourse, the phrase ultimately affirms its import. Yes, writing about music is like dancing about architecture. So what? Dramatic pause. The phrase's central flaw is ridiculing the act of crossing one discipline's boundary to illuminate another. As mentioned before, this is observably contrary to most musicians' practice and creatives in all the arts. Creativity is often, maybe always, a process of directed, simple synaesthesia. This is a psychological term for the state where stimuli is cross-sensed, hearing color or tasting touch. Usually, it's the unwelcome result of physical trauma. The late neurologist Oliver Sacks, in the chapter The Key of Clear Green for his book Musicophilia, described the common music color inversion. The melody has been a constant fascination for people in many imaginative disciplines. Charles Baudelaire and Arthur Rimbaud wrote poems about the synaesthesic experience, works that heavily influenced musicians such as Patti Smith, amongst others. Creativity manifests and experiments in the realm of the senses, so any phenomenon, especially a deranging one, is of interest and possible utility. Creativity and culture may be regarded as activities where reality is subjected to metaphor, to a deliberate disconnect of the senses. The process is an acknowledgement that experience cannot be contained by its host medium. You might need to paint a picture to celebrate words, and vice versa. Every physical means possible to the body may be called to the task in a figurative pageant. If taken literally, dancing about architecture suggests that music can truly only be about music, possibly only instrumentals. In reality, as soon as language permitted, lyrics were set to song. Instrumental music has long been inspired by, entitled to people, places, emotions, actions, and events. According to Ann Kilmer, professor of Assyriology at the University of California, the oldest known song dates from 1400 BCE and is a hymn to Nikal, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, the moon god's wife. Shall we fear the wrath of her husband's sin for our presumption? That's sin. If we're prohibited from dancing to architecture, our culture becomes entirely self-referential and insular, if we have one at all. Silence must descend, poetry purged from our pages, if cross-art connections are prohibited. In a commercially determined culture, art's a product, and artists must place fearsome, legally enforced claims on their, scare quotes, intellectual property. Poor reviews and inept commentaries threaten more than artists' pride. Livelihoods are at stake. This is felt sharply amongst graphic designers who regard practically all design writing as PR. While fine artists and musicians dissemble about their relationship with consumer culture, graphic design crafts its daily valentines. Practically, art must be regarded as a discrete possession with clearly delineated boundaries. Closing out any discussion of art also limits the event to the artist's supplied circumstance. Upon conclusion of the art, the curtain closes swiftly and firmly and the audience is ushered out, gagged. This possibility is untenable and contrary to history, and it's a foolish, self-defeating action. Countless works in all media are creative homages and progeny of a precursor, more so in our contemporary sampling era. In fact, criticism itself may be considered a long-standing sampling activity in culture. Discourse selects elements from the artwork to construct a new work. While less common, this form of sampling is established and widespread. Criticism, however, isn't usually awarded standing as an art form in its own right. It's regarded as, and frequently adopts the position of, being outside of creativity, a commentary upon it. Style and skill are desirable in commentators, yet discourse has secondary subservient status to art. A critic can more often be likened to a parasite or a barnacle on the body of art. And if an artist is feeling charitable, well, maybe it's a symbiote. And this is only the formal practice of art dialogue. Colloquial criticism is just someone talking smack. Squelching discussion is potentially hazardous economically for artists, far more than poor reviews. In reality, artists, musicians, and designers are striving to generate buzz about themselves and their work. But with potential reward, there's risk. In today's blogging landscape, the exponentially increased number of terpsichordians can make you a name or a target. Underlying this is a certainty that art is a generative experience, not a passive one. The potency of an artwork is in its ability to provoke response, whether verbal, written, or inspired, in the same medium or in another. Discussion extends the artwork beyond its physical, chronological boundaries. This extension links it with other works, forming the complex web of associations that is culture. The network of culture is always active, dynamic. transcending individual works. Our relationship to art can change under this conception. The art takes precedence over the artist and is an independent presence. The artist is the custodian, the medium for the art. In the case of music, it's that the music plays the performer. My first encounter with this notion was from guitarist Robert Fripp in a joint interview in 1981 with the late Joe Strummer of The Clash. Ooh, I missed it. Sometimes, and this is only a theory, I think that music needs a musician to play it. That the music itself is alive, but you have to be out there to know it. And at that point, it may be possible that the music is waiting to be played, so it needs a musician. Fripp is an idealistic but pragmatic musician who has spoken out frequently and passionately about musicians' legal and moral rights to their work. His term for one aspect of his performing, soundscapes, is pure dancing about architecture. Now, reflexively, I am opposed to a conception of an abstraction as an entity one serves, whether it be rock and roll or art or graphic design. However, Fripp links his idea to a generous communal experience that promotes and enriches public experience. Music also needs an audience, as well as all art does. Might art also perform the audience? The compulsion to witness creativity, to further sustain it through discourse, might be as profound as a creative impulse. Fan is an abbreviation of fanatic. That people bearing witness to art might struggle, stammer, thrash about, stumble over boundaries, all just to describe the enormity and allure of experience should draw no indictment. That expression can only be as driven and occasionally messy as the art that compelled it. The intensity of reaction to visual art, music, and literature is storied within and across each of those mediums. My special interest, however, is graphic design. Can the same be said for writing about that? If anything, graphic design status as a prosaic activity makes it eminently discussable. Writing about graphic design is like writing about graphic design. The challenge is making it strange. Now, HKM probably would add graphic design, had the practice existed then as we now know it, to the list of things that can be measurably described by describing what it represents. Today's graphic designers likely would agree. Graphic design is the ultimate representer. The dancing about architecture prohibition wouldn't seem to apply. The discipline's prosaic status is lauded within the design field and enforced within its professional literature. However, HKM's representation of the arts is naive and historically mistaken. As far as painting goes, he was probably thinking more about Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema than Kazimir Malevich. Writing in 1918, abstract art was just starting out and would soon definitively demolish HKM's conception of painting. The other disciplines I named were similarly straying from descriptiveness. And while realism and representation predominated prior to the early 20th century, matters were never as apparent as thought. Impressionism, for instance, had already twisted representation into eccentric areas that transcended literality. An enormity of meaning is lost if you say that, oh, Monet was just documenting Rouen Cathedral, and leave it at that. Some light fantastic is obligatory in your text to fully impart the painter's own fantastic light. The inadequacy of literal readings extends further back in history. For centuries, paintings have contained complex symbolism and iconography. Simply detailing the apparent account presented in a painting would overlook crucial meanings. Secondary narratives of contemporary times are woven throughout ostensibly religious stories. I take this from Dave Hickey. He talks about this in an essay. Caravaggio did this painting here, and this is a work of advertising. This was done during the time of the Protestant Reformation, when people are challenging the authority of the clergy to be the conduit to God. So the clergy goes to Caravaggio, the best art director of the time, and says, we need something to get the people back on it. Caravaggio says, got just the thing. So here we see an apparition of the Virgin Mary with the Christ child, and here are the people supplicating directly to her. But where is she pointing? She's pointing to the clergyman saying, talk to the robe. You don't talk directly to me like those Protestants think. You go through my authority. It's a billboard. Art history has prosaically documented various symbologies, no fancy stepping required. Yet artists utilize the symbolization as conduits to the ineffable, to revelation. Overall, the paintings are themselves examples of dancing about architecture, as are the poems, plays, statues, and graphic designs. Now, graphic design is ready for an unrepentantly absurd, tangential literary indulgence. Similar to the dance architecture pairing, there needs to be a linkage that's equally incongruous and evocative. For me, that association has been design and music. Writing about graphic design for me is an exercise of singing the surface. Graphic design is usually considered an accompanist discipline, a backing for the content. In this context, the lyrics carry the substance. The claim is, even within the design field, that here is where meaning truly resides. The words tell you what the song is about. Design is regarded as instrumental. It holds no content of its own. Just as our visual proclivity is towards representation, our auditory preference is towards vocalizing. Still, instrumental music has been historically stirring and substantive. Beethoven isn't panned for his lack of librettos. On their own, melodies hold sway. Design is instrumental. It creates a context for the content. It generates the desire to hear the words, and then becomes content in its own right. Now, representing graphic design as a surface-obsessed activity is a charged charge. While the simple truth to designers, it's a frequent slur decrying an alleged obscuring of an underlying emptiness. Yet, that surface resembles that of our body. Like skin, or the paper upon which graphic design is often performed, design itself is a cultural membrane composed of multiple layers. Its fine depths emblematized subtle strata of meaning. The songs of graphic design are diverse, encompassing all styles, from folk immediacy to industrial impersonality. In its most popular expressions, graphic design is a 2D musical staged daily on myriad platforms. Stock companies perform most of the shows, while many others are amateur hours, occasionally enlivened by the participants' verve, but plagued by flubbed lines and cardboard sets. Grabbing the headlines and attention, however, are the big-budget Broadway extravaganzas. Whatever the quality, we suspend our disbelief as characters unrelentingly croon tunes with the oddest subject matter, often extolling the virtues of some humdrum product or service. At the same time, there are the musics of the audience, their invented melodies and halting improvised performances. On one hand, formal graphic design doubts these airs, while cycling them back into proper compositions on the other. But it's the professional sounds of graphic design that fill the concert halls, a massed chorus dispersed throughout the world, harmonizing on ballads of people, places, possessions, participation, passions, and always more. All of them are pitch perfect, by which I mean they're destined for the garbage. What are the songs of the surface? For the lyrics, there is the magnificence of typefaces that embody words and compels associations and sensations. Fonts are visual madeleines, acting surreptitiously when wielded by sophisticates and often lay people alike. Their ubiquity compounds their stealth as they spell out ideals in their forms. There are the plangent profundities of a multitude of graphic marks, rules, curves, patterns, shapes, sigils. Hues assign humors, coloring these elements and the expanses amongst them. There is the symphony of a book, the album of a magazine. The sequencing and pacing of turned pages is no less a composition of movements and variations than is chamber music. The aspects of graphic design can magnify or nullify our interpretations of text and image. The arrangements of graphic elements on a page, their juxtaposition, can release storehouses of ideas, affect beliefs on how we should manage our body politic, how we relate to and operate our technology, and how we interpret reality itself. Now, that's worthy of a pop song at least, don't you think? Or more appropriately, an orgy of operas. Now, HKM proposes that it's contra-rational to sing about economics, infamously the dismal science. Too often, graphic design is made into the dismal art, overdetermined by commercial concerns. HKM's problem is being wrapped up about illogic when discussing the ineffable. Much of, maybe all creativity is extra-logical. But our modern era expects measurable description or silence. Now, this isn't to argue that writing about design shouldn't be exacting and substantive, just the opposite. It's to hope for writing that's adventurous and expansive when articulating graphic design. Writing that will trample boundaries gladly just to celebrate it, just as design scatters across page and screen and space. Design demands a disciplinary transubstantiation to fully portray its deceptive apparency, its manifold semblances. To talk about graphic design in voice and written word is to perform sight readings from a different kind of sheet music. If you know the score, please play and sing along. Thank you. And now you're all in stunned silence. But if you have questions, please. As he ducks out of sight. Yes.
What was the first, can you track the first time you thought that music might be a good metaphor to hang all these good ideas on?
I got into art overall and graphic design because of albums. I love music and album cover art. That's it. And which is typical of my our generation. You talk to any designers of this age and it's, album covers. And so there it is, and it just kept going. Poor album covers. I don't know what to make of it these days, because kids these days, they're into the vinyl again. There are all these really exotic packages. But but I'm not interested in buying them or getting them because it's just not the same. There isn't the same commercial constraints that made stuff like Barney Bubbles is my man. I mean, just, he is the ultimate. Right now, I'm finally doing the essay I've been meant to write and been meaning to do for 20 years. I'm in the middle of my Barney Bubbles appreciation. And what he did under those commercial and manufacturing constraints is amazing. Now, they aren't there, and so I appreciate the things that are being done with these special album covers, but it's just not the same. Cranky old fart talking, alert!
Since you wrote this, have any other design critics emerged, or pieces of design criticism emerged that you feel like is beginning to scratch the surface of what you're talking about?
I mean, overall, just anybody?
Yeah, anybody.
Well, I think Alfredi, I mean, I love his book, love that it's happening. Enjoy that tremendously. Just like anybody, you know, writing, it's you know, there was just something in the latest I magazine. There was a short education essay about the guy who does these modernist versions of album covers or something. What is it? And I love that. I shot the guy off an email right away saying, thank you for that. I'm really friends with and admire Michelle Champagne, who's doing that design smell. Come up with issue 2, please. And which has this as an essay in it. So those are just a couple of people, but it's so hard to find anybody, you know, or find people. There's just no forum for this. And, you know, as a writer, you know, whatever. You know, I don't think I deserve any kind of forum. But as a reader, I really despair that these forums, you know, don't exist. Francisco Larajo, who's doing the, you know, his thing, which I have something in, is great. You know, it's kind of a, you know, where could these things? It's a sad thing. Like a year or so ago, I wrote an 8,000 word essay. Where, again, something I meant to do for a long time. I need to take a really serious look at Paul Rand. And so on the, you know, when they reissued his book, I said, well, here's the time. And so I wrote this 8,000 word thing. It's like, who's gonna, you know, so I put it on my blog. And I tell people about it, and very nicely, you know, Rick Pointer writes back, says, yeah, I really like this. Is it gonna appear anywhere? And I say, where? Who's going to, you know, do this thing? And like I said, personally, I feel, you know, that's life. But as a reader, you know, I hope there are folks out there. It's just so hard to find them.
Do you think there are other things that, you know, many people have said, you know, the death of the critic is upon us? Are there other reasons that you see behind that?
Just that that there are no forum for this. I know, I'm curious to see, you get old and things go in cycles. I'm waiting for, soon will be the 90s revival again, where the landscape, you know, what happened in the 2000s was really a reaction to Emigre and all that writing. Let's put a stop to this, let's get back to business, and it was successful. You know, things how you know, now people primarily talk about Emigre, it's like, oh yeah, Type magazine. What about all that writing that was in it? And I think that's part of the thing. No, let's get that to the side. And so I can only hope that things swing back again, that people say, you know, like me, I want this to mean something, you know, something more. And so, you know, me, I just appreciate everybody and anybody who's doing it and support it in any way I can, because, you know, personally, it's selfish. Like say, me as a writer, I'm not owed a readership or a forum or anything, period. And I'm cool with that. But as a reader, I miss emigrating off being able to publish, but be able to read it. Kind of ironically, the issues I'm in are my least favorites. It's like, okay, I've been there. I want to be introduced to, something else. So somebody here, start the next thing. Start here.
Do you think, I'm sorry to ask you another question, I know there's a lot.
Is there a limit?
But do you think that this dearth of young critics, and I really do believe there is a dearth, has something to do with the falling apart of the education in the liberal arts that would promulgate the writing of English? Because many people who come out of design school cannot write their way out of a paper bag. And that's not their fault. That's the fault of the education that they got.
Yeah.
I think that might have something to do with that.
It can only be part of it, but primarily I just attribute it to the just overwhelming commercial drive of what graphic design is. And I say there are many people who what I do is of no utility of use for them, and I'm cool with it. There are people who I'm friends with in design who I respect but have no use for this kind of thing I do, and I'm fine with that as long as, I think I said in that little interview there, when design starts saying, oh, we aren't appreciated, we don't have a standing in culture. Well, what do you want? This is the kind of thing that has to happen. I'm not the one who's out there praising Massimo Vignelli's, the call for criticism. It's all these designers. You praise this essay, and then you don't act on it. That's not, my problem. I'm just pointing it out. You're the guys who say you want this. I want it because I enjoy it, and I'm cool if you say it has no meaning for my life. Fine, but there's that conflict, and sorry, you just gotta have this if you want that cultural standing. You just can't, we'll just keep getting closer and closer to well-regarded cultural figures and design their books, and that will do it. Yeah, okay, sure, that's working out fine for you, I suppose. I don't sound angry, I hope. I'm not.
I don't know, could you go back to that line where you said graphic design, writing means writing that is adventurous? I missed the few things and wanted to jot that down.
Towards the end?
It was towards the end. It was before the last slide. But yeah, you were talking about...
Before the disciplinary transubstantiation? Boy, there were a lot of sentences in there, weren't there? Let's see. The aspects of graphic design can magnify or nullify our interpretations.
No, I think it was like graphic design writing right now, like has a dearth of writing that is adventurous.
Oh, okay. It's not to argue that writing about design shouldn't be exacting and substantive. Just the opposite. It's to hope for writing that's adventurous and expansive when articulating graphic design. Writing that will trample boundaries gladly to celebrate it. Just as design scatters across page, screen, and space. Before I started to say this, I was listening, yesterday we were in the meeting about the thesis, starting the thesis, and you were saying, well, good writing is like spoken, and it made me start to worry about this because I wrote it with the intention of speaking it, but it's always like voices in my head, and when I read it, I said, my God, I'm going to have to say that out loud? I mean, I've got a thing for alliteration, if you hadn't noticed. And, it's like that D sentence there, wow. It was the D. It was the great. No, it's the P. The P one. Well, I think it was a demon. Anything else?
Sorry. I'm asking multiple questions too, like Natalia, but do you have any entry points for young critics of like how to get started in terms of not just writing the criticism, but and, you know, we can't all wait for Emigrate 2.0 or necessarily assume that our Medium post about design criticism might actually pick up traction. But do you have any thoughts about how to further discourse as a young critic? Like how might someone disseminate that adventurous or expansive criticism?
My thought is for the young folks, you're the ones who'll know better than me about, you know, I was the old model of it, which might still be the new model again as things come around. You know, it's, you know, I'm sorry, it's kind of like, well, you tell me, or you folks tell me, first of all, you know, like, do it. I had no clue when I started and had no intention of this. My first thing I wrote that was supposed to be it. It was, you know, literally, you know, my origin. You want to hear my origin story?
Yep.
In graduate school, my thesis project had become a study of contemporary design writing. And so it's my last semester and I'm writing my thesis. And what I do when I have a big writing project is I procrastinate by writing something else. To fool myself that I'm actually doing something constructive. And so what I did is I wrote a letter to the editor to Emigre. And I sent it off and forgot about it, and I'm in the middle of the thesis writing. And I'm literally having dreams at night where I'm having arguments with Steve Heller and design, you know, people who I had met at conferences. I started going to things. And I'm in my, you know, my house office one day writing. And the phone rings, and I pick it up, and this voice says, "Hi, this is Rudy from Emigre." And I'd been subscribing to Emigre for about a year or so, and what I did, I would call in. There was some trouble with my credit card for some reason, and I would get Tim Starback, who was their business person at the time. And so I'm so engaged with what I was doing, I thought it was Tim. And so while this person is talking to me, I'm thinking, wow, he's cold calling me to sell me typefaces. I've heard they're aggressive about selling their faces, but how am I going to let him down that I really, you know, not in the market? And the other side of my brain says, hey pal, he said Rudy, the editor guy. And so I pick up on the conversation. And, you know, he says he got the letter to the editor. And which up to that time, if I thought about it, I said, well, it's so stupid it won't run, so I don't have to worry about being embarrassed. And he says he really liked the letter, and it was a response to another letter that Michael Beirut wrote. And he said, well, Michael's a friend of ours and, you know, a supporter. And I said, well, I liked what he wrote also, but I want to show the other side. And Rudy invites me. He says, have you heard of this thing by Elliot Earls, Throwing Apples at the Sun? I said, yeah, I've been trying to find $100 scraped together to buy it. And he says, well, would you be interested in reviewing it? Well, you know, we'll send it to you. And I say, sure. And he tells me what the deadline is, which is before my thesis is due. So I started writing both at the same time. And I say yes, and I had never considered like critically analyzing or studying something, and particularly something like this. And so it arrives, and well, no, before it arrives, so I hang up the phone and I say, wow, this is just amazing. I go back to writing. And suddenly after a day or so, I start to wonder whether the phone call actually happened because I've been having these dreams. And so when the letter finally arrives for him, it's like, graphic design has another purpose. It affirms reality. You know, it actually happened. And so I start writing this thing, and I have no clue. And I suppose the best thing is I know about forums, but I just said, well, this is the only time I'm going to do this. I have no idea how it's supposed to be done. There isn't, the models I've read, there were good things. I mean, by that time I had read various people, Rick Poynter, I greatly admire, Ellen Lupton, Abbott Miller, their stuff, Lorraine Wild, stuff that I just, Jeff Keighley, who we were talking about, which made it harder. Is like, oh my God, what the hell do I know? But I said, what do I know? I'm just going to cut loose and have at it. And, it was just, and then I said, okay, that's over with and done. And then Rudy calls me an issue or so later. Hey, what do you think about, I sent him a bio and I mentioned my magazine project. I said, what's that all about? And I describe it, and he says, well, I'm doing a special issue on magazines. Would you like me to print it? And can you send me samples of it? And I say, sure, because only about 2 pages of it existed at the moment. And just to wring every dollar out of you, would you mind writing another little piece? And then it just became, so I did that. And then he asked me to do something else. And then suddenly and each one I say, okay, that was fun, that's it. And then suddenly I'm doing it. And so just do it. Just do it. Be secure and knowledgeable in the sense that nobody's going to read it. Then if you say something, meaningful, people will write how you are a bundle of anger and resentment. And I'm still proud. I think the longest letter to the editor ever to appear in I magazine is one that just goes after me. It was just so wonderful. So I took all the effort just to say how I was dumbing down culture and graphic design. So just embrace the fact that you won't be understood in what you read is. Whatever.
So, what is it that, so it's a two-part question. What is it that you find stimulating about writing? And why would you encourage others to do it?
It's really my way to work things out. I have, when something, I come across something, I don't go into critical mode. I just let it wash over me. And then I have these feelings and I want to work out, why do I feel that way? And it starts making associations and I try and figure out, well, how do I feel about this thing? And it's also that I so love reading other writers talking about things. I think that's a big part of it. Well, it might not be for other people. Like, I bow down to Lester Bangs. That stuff. I can go back and read an old record review anytime by him because, what I want is not to convince you of a certain opinion in any ways. You can think what you want, and I'm fine with that. I suppose what I really want you to do is love the writing and return to it later on just to sort of, enjoy it. I don't know if that's answering it, and another part of it is, I don't like other people telling me how I should think or feel about something. I'm really arrogant that I know how I feel about this. I'm not sort of like ashamed of any of them. You can tease me about some of the things. Who's the guy here who talked shit about Neko Atsume? You're answering to me. I have it on my phone and on my iPad. And I'm fine with that. And so, go talk. And I just, and I've always been this way. I've got an opinion about that, and I'm going to say it. I want to be part of the conversation. It is really scary for me, but also, I've got to do it. I've got to do it. This is my time here. This stuff is out there. And I tell you folks, you live through it. You know, it's understandable. It's sort of scary. It's very flattering. People have said to me many times, well, you're really brave to have written that. And I say, thank you, but I don't feel sort of that way because, well, there is kind of, some people can really hate you. And it can influence your career sometime. But on the whole, you know, what you find is the people who say, you know, I was thinking that too. I was thinking that too, or something like it. And as I said, there are various people. I know I will say the overwhelming majority of people I've met in design are really nice people. And there are people who are friends of mine and good friends who I know don't buy into how I see things. But but they respect me and I treasure that, you know, a great deal. And you know, and here's graphic design. It's all about this communication and this public sort of sharing and discussion. So, you know, take part in it. You know, you'll, like I said, you'll find that people might disagree with the ideas. You know, me personally, I take every compliment personally, but every negative comment I take professionally. You know, which I think is how it is. Meaning, you know, it's like. I'm fine with that. So all these, you know, mean things, whatever. You know, okay, I'm fine. You know, I'm fine with that. It's the nice things. Sure. You know, it's very comfortable. So, what can they do to you, right? You know, what can anyone do to you? You could end up talking in front of people wearing a white lab coat. How bad can that be?